It was a crisp April morning when my life began to unravel. The kind of morning where everything seems perfectly ordinary until suddenly, it isn't. I remember sitting at our kitchen table, nursing my second cup of coffee while flipping through the business section of the newspaper. Rebecca and I had fallen into a comfortable routine after 32 years of marriage. She would prepare breakfast. Nothing fancy, just toast and eggs most days, and I would read the paper before heading to the office. That morning, she placed a plate in front of me and kissed the top of my head, her hand lingering on my shoulder, a moment longer than usual. "Don't forget we have the Hendersons' dinner party on Friday," she said, her voice carrying that slight musical quality I'd always loved. "And Daniel called last night while you were in the shower. He and Sarah are thinking about coming to visit next month with the grandkids." This made me lower my paper. Our son lived across the country, and visits with our grandchildren were precious. "That's great news. Did they set a date?" "Not yet. He said he'd call you this weekend to discuss details." She smiled, but something about it seemed off, strained around the edges. I should have noticed then. Should have seen the subtle shift in her demeanor over the past few months, the late-night text she'd quickly hide when I entered the room, the sudden interest in her appearance after years of comfortable familiarity, the book club meetings that had mysteriously increased from monthly to weekly. But I didn't. Not until that evening when I came home early from work with a splitting headache and heard her voice drifting from our bedroom. "I can't wait to see you again," she was saying, her tone soft and intimate in a way that made my blood run cold. I know, it's complicated, but we'll figure it out." "He doesn't suspect anything," she continued, followed by a laugh I hadn't heard in years. "Don't worry about that. Michael is predictable. Predictable." The word hit me like a physical blow. 32 years reduced to a single dismissive adjective. Whoa. It should have burst into the room then. Should have confronted her immediately. But something held me back. Perhaps the shock, or maybe some primal instinct to gather more information before showing my hand. So I quietly backed away, returned to my car, and drove around aimlessly for 2 hours before returning home, making sure to slam the front door loudly to announce my arrival. "Rebecca?" I called out, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. When I walked in, she was chopping vegetables for dinner, looking exactly like the woman I'd married all those years ago. But now I saw her through different eyes, a stranger wearing my wife's face. "You're home early," she remarked, leaning in for a kiss that I somehow managed to return. She frowned with what appeared to be genuine concern. "Poor thing. Take some aspirin and rest. Dinner will be ready in an hour." I nodded and retreated to my study, closing the door behind me. Only then did I allow myself to sink into my chair, hands trembling, as the reality of what I'd discovered began to take hold. The next week passed in a fog of suspicion and barely contained rage. I became a detective in my own home, watching Rebecca's every move while pretending nothing had changed. Each smile, each casual touch now felt like a betrayal, a performance designed to keep me in the dark. I found myself doing things I never imagined, checking her phone when she was in the shower, looking through credit card statements for unusual charges, even driving past the coffee shop where her book club supposedly met. The man I saw reflected in the mirror each morning was becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone consumed by doubt and paranoia. But the evidence mounted steadily. There were texts from someone saved simply as J in her phone, innocuous on the surface but laden with inside jokes and vague references to meetings. There were unexplained charges at restaurants across town on days when she claimed to be shopping with friends. And there was the subtle but unmistakable change in how she carried herself, a renewed confidence, a glow that had nothing to do with me. I considered hiring a private investigator, but couldn't bring myself to involve a stranger in our private humiliation. Instead, I turned to the one person I trusted completely, my brother Alan. "Are you absolutely sure?" he asked when I called him, his voice heavy with concern. "This isn't something you can take back once it's out there, Mike." "I'm sure," I replied, surprised by the hollow quality of my own voice. "I need to know who he is." The plan was simple. Rebecca had mentioned another book club meeting the following Thursday. Alan would follow her, discreetly, and confirm where she went and who she met. Those intervening days were some of the longest of my life. I went through the motions at work, nodding at appropriate moments during meetings, while my mind churned with scenarios of betrayal. At home, I maintained the facade of normalcy, eating dinners across from Rebecca and discussing mundane topics while silently cataloging each potential lie. Thursday arrived with agonizing slowness, Rebecca dressed with particular care that morning, a new blouse I didn't recognize, her hair styled differently. "You look nice," I commented over breakfast, hating how my compliment was now tainted with suspicion. She smiled, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Thank you. We're discussing a rather romantic novel tonight. Thought I'd dress the part." The casual way she lied to my face made something twist painfully in my chest. He described following Rebecca not to any bookstore or coffee shop, but to an upscale restaurant downtown. She'd met a man there, tall, silver-haired, well-dressed. They'd embraced in a way that left no doubt about their relationship, and then disappeared inside. "Do you know who he is?" I asked, my fingers gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "I took a photo," Alan replied hesitantly. "But Mike, are you sure you want to see this?" The image arrived moments later. The man had his arm around Rebecca's waist, his face turned toward hers with an intimacy that made me physically ill. But what truly stunned me was that I recognized him immediately. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. James had been at our home countless times for dinner parties and barbecues. He'd shaken my hand and clapped me on the back while secretly coveting my wife. And Rebecca, she'd served him drinks and laughed at his jokes while they carried on their deception right under my nose. The betrayal was complete. Not just my wife, but a man I'd trusted professionally and personally for over a decade. I sat in my darkened study for hours, the photo burning a hole in my phone and my mind. By the time I heard Rebecca's key in the lock shortly after midnight, I had moved beyond shock to a cold, calculated anger that felt almost like clarity. She entered quietly, clearly trying not to wake me. I listened to her routine, the soft thud of her purse on the entryway table, the whisper of her coat being hung, the gentle click of her heels on the hardwood floor. She gasped, hand flying to her throat as she spun to face me sitting in the darkness of our bedroom. "Michael, you scared me half to death. What are you doing sitting in the dark?" "Waiting for my wife to come home from her fictional book club," I replied, my voice unnervingly calm even to my own ears. "Did you enjoy your evening with James?" The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. "What are you talking about?" "Please don't insult me further by lying," I said, rising from the chair. "I know everything, Rebecca. I know about the texts, the secret meetings, the lies you've been feeding me for months. I know you've been sleeping with James Harrington." She stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Then, abruptly, her expression hardened. "How dare you spy on me?" she hissed, attempting to flip the narrative. "Have you been following me?" I laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "That's what concerns you? Not the fact that you betrayed our 32-year marriage, but that you got caught." "Then what is it, Rebecca? Enlighten me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like my wife having an affair with my colleague." Her shoulders slumped slightly, the fight draining out of her. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. "It just did." "Things like this don't just happen," I replied, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain controlled. "You made choices, hundreds of them. Every time you lied about where you were going. Every time you texted him behind my back. Every time you slept with him and then came home to me. Those were all choices. 8 months. While we celebrated our anniversary. While we hosted Christmas for our children and grandchildren. While we planned our future. Why?" The question escaped before I could stop it, revealing a vulnerability I'd wanted to conceal. Rebecca sank onto the edge of the bed, her composure crumbling. "I don't know. He made me feel seen, desired. It's been so long since we really connected, Michael. We've been going through the motions for years." "So this is my fault?" I asked incredulously. "I didn't pay enough attention to you, so naturally you had to sleep with someone else." "That's not what I'm saying," she protested. "But we've grown apart. You're always working or lost in your own world. When was the last time we really talked? Really saw each other?" Her attempt to shift blame ignited something primal within me. "Get out," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Get out of our bedroom. Get out of our house. I can't look at you right now without wanting to say things I might regret." She flinched as if I'd struck her, then gathered a few items and fled the room. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, followed by the soft click of the guest bedroom door. I stood alone in our bedroom, surrounded by the remnants of a marriage I now realized had been dying long before tonight. The wedding photo on the dresser, the matching robes hanging on the bathroom door, the indentation of her body still visible on her side of the bed. The days that followed were a blur of practical arrangements and emotional devastation. Rebecca moved into the guest bedroom without protest, and we established an uneasy ceasefire, communicating only when absolutely necessary. The silence in our home was deafening, a physical presence that followed me from room to room. I took a week off work, unable to face James or the possibility of office gossip. Instead, I met with a lawyer, a soft-spoken woman named Elaine, who listened to my story without judgment before outlining my options with clinical precision. Michigan is a no-fault divorce state, she explained, but evidence of infidelity can sometimes influence property division and spousal support. Do you have documentation of the affair? I showed her the photo Alan had taken, along with screenshots of text messages I'd found on Rebecca's phone. She nodded. This is a start, but I need to ask, are you certain divorce is what you want? Some couples do recover from infidelity. The question caught me off guard. Until that moment, I hadn't fully acknowledged that our marriage was over. There had been no discussion of separation or divorce with Rebecca, just the Cold War we were currently waging under one roof. Elaine's expression remained neutral. That's a valid response, but I suggest you take some time to consider all options before filing. Divorce at your age after a long-term marriage has significant financial implications. I left her office with a folder of information and an even heavier heart. The practical reality of dismantling our shared life was daunting. Our house, retirement accounts, even our social circle would need to be divided. And then there was the matter of telling our children. Daniel, our son, lived in Seattle with his wife and 2 young daughters. Our daughter, Emma, was closer, just an hour away in Grand Rapids with her husband. How would I tell them that their family as they knew it was imploding? I decided to start with Emma. She had always been perceptive, often sensing tensions between Rebecca and me, long before we acknowledged them ourselves. We met at a quiet cafe midway between our homes. The moment she saw my face, her expression changed. Dad, what's wrong? She asked, reaching across the table to grasp my hand. Is it Mom? Is she sick? Your mother is physically fine, I replied carefully, but there's something I need to tell you, and it's not easy. As gently as possible, I explained the situation. Emma listened without interrupting, her eyes widening with shock, and then narrowing with anger. That, she sputtered, unable to find words adequate to express her feelings. How could she do this to you? To us? People make mistakes, I said, surprising myself with the moderation in my tone. Your mother and I have had problems for a long time. That's no excuse. Emma's voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. There are other ways to handle marital problems. Cheating is a choice. I couldn't argue with her assessment. It mirrored my own thoughts too closely. But seeing my daughter's pain added a new dimension to my own. This wasn't just about Rebecca and me anymore. It was about our entire family. What are you going to do? Emma finally asked, her anger giving way to concern. She squeezed my hand. Whatever you decide, I'm here for you, and I'll talk to Daniel if you want. The conversation with Daniel was more difficult, conducted over a video call that couldn't fully convey the gravity of the situation. He reacted with stunned silence followed by practical questions. Where would I live? What about finances? Had I considered counseling? I'm not saying you should forgive her, he clarified, but 32 years is a long time to throw away without at least trying to understand what happened. His words stayed with me, echoing in my mind as I drove home. Was I being too hasty? Should we at least attempt counseling before ending our marriage? The question became moot when I arrived home to find Rebecca packing a suitcase. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. I'm going to stay with my sister for a while. We both need some space to think. Running away to avoid the consequences? The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Rebecca flinched. No. Giving us both room to breathe. This situation is impossible, Michael. We can't keep living like this, passing each other in the hallway like ghosts. She was right, of course. The tension in the house was unbearable, but her departure felt like another abandonment, another choice to prioritize her needs over our relationship. Just like that? I laughed humorlessly. 8 months of betrayal? And it's suddenly over? He ended it when he found out you knew, she admitted quietly. Apparently he values his career more than whatever we had. The revelation that James had discarded her so easily should have brought me satisfaction. Instead, it only deepened my sense of all we had lost for something so ultimately worthless. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I'll call them, try to explain. What will you say? I challenged. What possible explanation could make this okay? Nothing will make it okay, she whispered. But they deserve to hear from me directly. I won't make excuses, Michael. I know what I did was wrong. Her admission should have felt like vindication. Instead, it left me feeling hollow. What good was her remorse now, after everything was already broken? I watched silently as she finished packing, then carried her suitcase downstairs. At the front door, she paused. I do love you, she said softly. I know you don't believe that right now, and I don't blame you. But it's true. I couldn't bring myself to respond. How could love and betrayal coexist? How could she claim to love me while systematically deceiving me? After she left, I wandered through our empty house, feeling its silence press against me from all sides. 32 years of shared history surrounded me, photos on the walls, furniture we'd selected together, the garden we'd planted and tended. All of it now tainted by her betrayal. That night, I slept in our bed for the first time since the confrontation. Her scent still lingered on her pillow, and I found myself caught between the urge to bury my face in it and the desire to burn it. In the end, I simply lay awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering how my life had unraveled so completely in the span of a few weeks. Rebecca's departure created a strange limbo in my life. Without the immediate tension of sharing space, I found myself adrift, unsure how to proceed. I returned to work after 2 weeks, bracing myself for the inevitable awkwardness with James. To my surprise, he wasn't there. A terse email from HR informed the department that James had decided to pursue other opportunities and would not be returning. His abrupt departure sparked speculation, but no one connected it to me, at least not openly. I threw myself into work with renewed vigor, staying late most evenings to avoid returning to an empty house. My colleagues noticed the change, but attributed it to James's departure creating additional responsibilities. Only my assistant, Margaret, seemed to sense something deeper was wrong. You know, my husband and I see a wonderful therapist, she mentioned casually one evening as I was preparing to leave. If you ever need someone to talk to, professionally, I mean. I thanked her without committing, but the suggestion lingered. Perhaps talking to someone objective would help me sort through the tangle of emotions I couldn't seem to unravel on my own. Dr. Levine's office was nothing like I expected. No leather couch or sterile environment, just a comfortable room with soft lighting and 2 armchairs facing each other. The doctor herself was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a direct manner that put me at ease despite my reservations about therapy. So, Michael, she said after I'd given her a brief overview of my situation, what do you hope to gain from our sessions? The question caught me off guard. I'm not sure, I admitted. Clarity, I suppose. Everyone keeps asking what I'm going to do, and I don't have an answer. She nodded. That's a reasonable place to start. But I'd like to dig a bit deeper. When you think about your marriage now, what emotions come up first? It's not just Rebecca I've lost, I explained, the realization forming as I spoke. It's my understanding of our entire relationship. Every memory is now suspect. Was she happy in that vacation photo, or was she wishing she was with someone else? Did she mean it when she said she loved me, or was it just habit? I feel like my past has been stolen from me. Dr. Levine listened attentively. That's a common experience after betrayal, this questioning of the relationship's history. But I want to challenge you to consider something. Is it possible that both things can be true? That Rebecca did love you and was happy in many moments, while still making the terrible choice to be unfaithful? The suggestion that our marriage hadn't been a complete lie was both comforting and confusing. I wanted the clarity of absolutes. She was either the loving wife I believed her to be, or the deceitful betrayer I now saw. The idea that she could be both simultaneously was difficult to reconcile. Over the next few sessions, Dr. Levine guided me through the complex landscape of my emotions. We discussed not just the affair, but the state of our marriage before the betrayal. I found myself acknowledging truths I had long avoided. How Rebecca and I had gradually drifted apart, becoming more like roommates than lovers. How I had retreated into work when faced with emotional challenges. How we had both stopped trying to truly connect years ago. None of this excuses infidelity, Dr. Levine emphasized. Rebecca made choices that violated your trust, and your anger about that is completely justified. But understanding the context might help you decide what you want for your future. 4 weeks into therapy, Rebecca called to ask if we could meet. We arranged to have coffee at a neutral location, a cafe neither of us had frequented before. She looked different somehow, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite conceal. But there was also a new resolve in her posture, a steadiness I hadn't expected. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she began after we'd ordered. "I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I did what I did." "I'm not going to make excuses," she said firmly. "What I did was wrong, selfish, and destructive, but I want you to know that it wasn't about you, not really. It was about me feeling invisible and irrelevant as I got older. James made me feel desired at a time when I was struggling with my sense of self-worth. So I'm supposed to feel better because you betrayed me due to a midlife crisis." I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. She shook her head. "No, I'm just trying to be honest about what happened. I made terrible choices that hurt you deeply, and I will regret that for the rest of my life." Her sincerity was disarming. I had expected defensiveness or attempts to minimize her actions. Instead, she was offering a full acknowledgement of the pain she had caused. She took a deep breath. "I want a chance to rebuild. Not to go back to what we had. That clearly wasn't working for either of us. But to create something new. Something honest. I still love you, Michael. I never stopped. Even when I was betraying that love in the worst possible way." Her words hung between us, a fragile offering I wasn't sure I could accept. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again," I said finally. "And without trust, what do we have?" "We have 32 years of history," she replied. "2 children we raised together. Grandchildren who deserve to have both their grandparents in their lives. And maybe, if we're both willing to do the hard work, we could build a new kind of trust, one based on complete honesty about who we are now, not who we pretended to be for years." I didn't have an answer for her that day. We parted with an agreement to keep communicating, to take things one step at a time. That night, I found myself looking through old photo albums, something I had avoided since discovering the affair. There we were on our wedding day, young and radiant with hope. There were the early years of parenthood, both of us exhausted but fulfilled. Family vacations, holiday gatherings, ordinary moments captured and preserved. Azoflamusite, had it all been a lie? Or was Dr. Levine right? Could Rebecca have truly loved me while still making the devastating choice to betray that love? I didn't have answers, but for the first time since discovering the affair, I allowed myself to consider the possibility of a future that included Rebecca, not as the wife I had idealized, but as the flawed, complex woman she actually was. 2 days after our coffee meeting, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. The receptionist called to say Mr. Harrington was asking to see me, and before I could process my reaction, James was standing in my doorway. He looked terrible, unshaven with the rumpled appearance of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. Gone was the confident colleague I had known for years, replaced by a man who seemed to have aged a decade in a month. Every instinct urged me to throw him out, to unleash the fury I had been containing for weeks. Instead, I gestured silently to the chair across from my desk. He sat, his eyes fixed on his hands. "I know you probably hate me," he began. "You have every right to." He looked up, meeting my gaze directly for the first time. "To apologize. Not that it changes anything, but you deserve to hear it face to face. I betrayed your friendship and your trust, in the worst possible way." He shook his head. "No, I don't expect or deserve forgiveness. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't at least try to acknowledge the harm I've caused." Something about his obvious distress punctured my anger, allowing curiosity to seep through. "Why did you do it? We were friends, James. I trusted you." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I wish I had a better answer than the truth, which is that I was selfish and weak. Rebecca and I grew close during that charity project last year. She confided in me about feeling invisible in your marriage, and instead of encouraging her to talk to you, I took advantage of her vulnerability." His admission confirmed what Rebecca had told me about the affair's beginning, which was oddly validating. At least they weren't coordinating lies. Did you love her? The question escaped before I could consider whether I really wanted to know the answer. James looked genuinely surprised. "No, I cared for her, certainly, but it wasn't love. It was, I don't know, an escape maybe. My marriage had been over for years, but I was too cowardly to end it officially. Being with Rebecca let me pretend I could still feel something." His candor was unexpected and strangely deflating. I had built James up in my mind as a calculated predator who had deliberately targeted my wife. The reality that he was just a lonely, middle-aged man making poor choices was almost disappointing in its banality. He nodded grimly. "Among other things, my wife found out about the affair and filed for divorce. My daughters aren't speaking to me, and I resigned before I could be fired for violating the company's ethics policy on relationships with colleagues' spouses. There was a time when his downfall would have brought me satisfaction. Now, looking at the broken man before me, I felt only a hollow sense of waste, of friendship, of trust, of the respect we had once shared. "I don't forgive you," I said finally. "I don't know if I ever will, but I appreciate you having the courage to come here today." Relief flickered across his face. "Thank you for hearing me out. I won't take up any more of your time." As he rose to leave, a question occurred to me. "James, when did it end? The affair, I mean." He paused at the door. "About a week before you found out. Rebecca ended it. She said she couldn't keep living a double life, that the guilt was destroying her." This new information rattled me. Rebecca had ended the affair before I discovered it? Why hadn't she told me that? No. After James left, I sat at my desk, unable to focus on work as I processed this revelation. If Rebecca had already ended the affair, what did that mean? Was she planning to confess? Or simply hoping to bury the past and continue our marriage as if nothing had happened? I called her that evening, my thoughts still churning. "We need to talk," I said when she answered. "There's something I need to ask you directly." We met at our house, the first time Rebecca had been back since moving to her sister's. She looked around with a mixture of longing and apprehension as she entered, as if unsure of her welcome in what had once been her home. "James came to see me today," I said without preamble once we were seated in the living room, "to apologize, and he told me something interesting, that you ended the affair a week before I found out about it. Is that true?" She nodded slowly. "Yes. I couldn't do it anymore. The lying, the sneaking around. It was eating me alive. Were you ever going to tell me?" I demanded, the question that had been burning inside me all afternoon. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "I was trying to find the courage. I knew once I told you, our marriage might be over, but I also knew I couldn't keep living with the secret. So when you told me you wanted a divorce that morning, was that your way of confessing?" She looked genuinely confused. "What? No. I never told you I wanted a divorce." Now it was my turn to be confused. "The morning I overheard your phone call, you came to breakfast and said you wanted a divorce." Understanding dawned on her face. "Michael, that never happened. You came home early one day and barely spoke to me. I assumed you were just tired or stressed about work." The realization hit me with stunning force. I had been so certain of what I'd heard, so consumed by my discovery, that I had constructed a narrative that didn't exist. Rebecca hadn't asked for a divorce. I had simply assumed that was where we were headed after I discovered her betrayal. "I don't understand," I said, struggling to reconcile my memories with her account. "If you weren't planning to leave me for James, why did you move out?" "Because you told me to," she replied simply. "You said you couldn't look at me without wanting to say things you'd regret. And I thought giving you space was the least I could do after what I'd put you through." We stared at each other across the coffee table, both realizing how fundamentally we had misunderstood the situation. I had been operating under the assumption that Rebecca had chosen to leave our marriage for James. She had been operating under the assumption that I wanted her gone. "What do you want, Rebecca?" I asked again, echoing my question from our coffee meeting but with new context. She took a deep breath. "I want to come home. I want us to try to rebuild what we've lost, not just since the affair, but in the years before it when we stopped really seeing each other. I want us to be honest about our needs and fears instead of retreating into silence and resentment. But most of all, I want you to know how deeply sorry I am for the pain I've caused." Her words resonated with unexpected clarity. The affair hadn't happened in a vacuum. It had grown in the cracks of a marriage that both of us had neglected for years. That didn't excuse her choices, but it did place them in a context I could begin to understand. "I'm still angry," I admitted. "And hurt. And I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again." She nodded, accepting this without defense. "I know. And I'm prepared to spend however long it takes trying to rebuild that trust. But I can't do it alone, Michael. We both need to be willing to create something new from the ashes of what we had." I looked at the woman sitting across from me, not the idealized wife of my memory or the villain of my recent pain, but a complex human being who had made terrible mistakes and was now seeking a path toward redemption. "I'm not making any promises," I said finally, "but I'm willing to try counseling, together, to see if there's anything left worth saving." The relief that washed over her face was palpable. "That's all I'm asking for. A chance." As she left that evening, returning to her sisters by mutual agreement that we needed to proceed slowly, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first tentative step toward a future I couldn't yet envision, but was no longer willing to dismiss entirely. The journey from betrayal to healing isn't linear. There were days when the anger would return with such force that I could barely speak to Rebecca during our therapy sessions. There were nights when the images of her, with James, would invade my dreams, leaving me gasping awake in a cold sweat. And there were moments when I questioned whether the effort to rebuild was worth the constant pain of remembering. Dr. Levine, now serving as our couples therapist, guided us through these turbulent waters with steady patience. Healing from infidelity takes time, she reminded us. The average is about 2 years before couples report feeling stable again, and that's with consistent work from both partners. 2 years seemed an eternity from where we stood, but we committed to the process one session at a time. Rebecca moved back into our home after 3 months, but into the guest bedroom, a physical representation of the distance we still needed to bridge. Our children reacted to this development with mixed emotions. Emma remained coldly civil toward her mother, unable to fully forgive the pain Rebecca had caused. Daniel was more receptive to the idea of reconciliation, perhaps because his own marriage had weathered serious challenges. "People make mistakes, Dad," he told me during one of our weekly calls. "Terrible, hurtful mistakes sometimes. But that doesn't mean they're irredeemable." His words echoed in my mind during a particularly difficult therapy session 6 months into our reconciliation attempt. Rebecca and I had been discussing trust, specifically my ongoing struggle to believe her when she said she was where she claimed to be. "I understand why you doubt me," she acknowledged, pain evident in her voice. "I've given you every reason to, but I don't know how to prove my trustworthiness, except by being consistently honest, day after day." "It's not about proof," I tried to explain. "It's about this constant vigilance I can't seem to shut off. Every time your phone buzzes, every time you're late coming home, every time you mention a colleague's name I don't recognize, my mind immediately goes to the worst possibility." Dr. Levine leaned forward. "Michael, what you're describing is hypervigilance, a common response to betrayal trauma. Your brain is trying to protect you from being hurt again by constantly scanning for threats. It's exhausting, isn't it?" I nodded, relieved to have a name for the constant state of alertness that had become my default mode. "The question," she continued, "is whether you want to live this way indefinitely. Because while Rebecca can and should continue to demonstrate her commitment to honesty, the decision to trust again ultimately rests with you." Her words struck me with unexpected force. I had been waiting for the day when trust would simply return, when the doubt would magically disappear. But what if trust wasn't something that happened to you, but a choice you made despite the risk? That evening, as Rebecca and I prepared dinner together, one of the new rituals we had established to create shared experiences, I found myself watching her with new eyes. She moved around the kitchen with familiar grace, her face relaxed in concentration as she chopped vegetables. This was the woman I had loved for more than 3 decades. The woman who had betrayed that love in the most painful way possible. And also the woman who had spent the past 6 months doing everything in her power to make amends. "I've been thinking," I said as we sat down to eat. "Maybe it's time for you to move back into our bedroom." She looked up, surprise and hope mingling in her expression. "Are you sure? I don't want to rush you." "I'm not saying everything is fixed," I clarified, "but I'm tired of living in limbo. If we're really trying to build something new, we need to take risks." That night, as we lay side by side in what had once been our shared bed, I felt the weight of the choice before me. I could continue to punish Rebecca for her betrayal, keeping her at arm's length emotionally while going through the motions of reconciliation. Or I could take the terrifying leap toward genuine forgiveness, not forgetting what had happened, but choosing to move forward despite it. "I want to trust you again," I whispered into the darkness. "I'm just not sure I remember how." Her hand found mine under the covers, a tentative touch that asked permission rather than assuming welcome. "Maybe trust isn't something you feel all at once," she suggested softly. "Maybe it's built one day at a time, one choice at a time." The wisdom in her words resonated deeply. Perhaps trust, like healing, wasn't a destination but a journey, one that required consistent effort and conscious choice. As the months passed, those choices became gradually easier. The hypervigilance Dr. Levine had identified began to recede, replaced by a cautious optimism. Rebecca and I established new patterns of communication, checking in with each other throughout the day, not out of suspicion, but out of genuine interest in each other's lives. We scheduled regular date nights, rediscovering shared interests and developing new ones. And slowly, tentatively, we began to rebuild physical intimacy, not as an obligation or habit, but as a genuine expression of reconnection. 1 year after the discovery of the affair, we decided to renew our vows in a small, private ceremony, attended only by our children and grandchildren. It wasn't about pretending the betrayal hadn't happened, or that our marriage had been perfect before it. Rather, it was an acknowledgement that we were choosing each other again, with clear eyes and full awareness of both our capacity for hurt and our capacity for healing. "I promise to be honest with you, even when it's difficult," Rebecca said, her voice steady as she held my hands, "to respect your feelings and needs as equal to my own, and to work every day to be worthy of the trust you're choosing to place in me." My own vows acknowledged my part in the state of our marriage before the affair, the emotional distance I had maintained, the refuge I had sought in work rather than connection. "I promise to be present," I said, "not just physically, but emotionally. To listen not just to your words, but to what lies beneath them. And to remember that love is not just a feeling, but a daily choice." As we spoke these promises, I felt something shift inside me, a loosening of the knot of anger and hurt that had resided in my chest for so long. Not gone entirely, perhaps it never would be, but transformed into something I could carry without being defined by it. After the ceremony, as our family gathered for a celebratory dinner, I found myself watching Rebecca across the table. She was laughing at something our granddaughter had said, her face alight with joy and love. And in that moment, I realized that while the past could not be undone, it also did not have to determine our future. The betrayal would always be part of our story, but it would not be the end of it. 5 years have passed since that April morning when my world turned upside down. 5 years of hard work, painful conversations, and gradual healing. 5 years of rebuilding not just trust, but something more fundamental, a genuine partnership based on honesty and mutual respect. Rebecca and I are not the same people we were before the affair. How could we be? Such profound betrayal and its aftermath change you irrevocably, but the change hasn't been entirely negative. In many ways, we know each other more truly now than we did in the decades before the affair. The masks we wore, of perfect spouse, of contentment, of having it all figured out, have been stripped away, revealing the flawed, complex humans beneath. We still attend therapy, though less frequently now. Dr. Levine has become more of a guide for life's ongoing challenges than a healer of past wounds. She helped us navigate Rebecca's retirement 2 years ago, a transition that might once have created distance, but instead brought us closer as we explored new interests together. James occasionally crosses my mind, though with decreasing frequency and emotional charge. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he moved to Arizona after his divorce was finalized, starting over in both his personal and professional life. I no longer wish him ill. The energy required for sustained hatred is better directed elsewhere. Our children have made their own peace with what happened, though in different ways and to different degrees. Emma's initial anger has softened over time, especially after witnessing the genuine effort Rebecca and I have put into rebuilding our relationship. Daniel, always the more forgiving of the two, has become an unexpected source of wisdom about the complexities of long-term commitment. "Marriage isn't for the faint of heart," he told me during a recent visit. "Sarah and I have had our struggles too. Nothing like what you and Mom went through, but enough to know that staying together through the hard parts takes courage." His words resonated deeply. There have been many moments during the past 5 years when it would have been easier to walk away, to start fresh with someone new rather than continue the painful work of rebuilding with Rebecca. But the easier path isn't always the more rewarding one. Last month, Rebecca and I celebrated our 37th wedding anniversary with a trip to the coastal town where we honeymooned all those years ago. As we walked along the beach at sunset hand in hand, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this moment. "Do you ever regret staying?" Rebecca asked quietly, as if reading my thoughts. "After what I did, no one would have blamed you for leaving." I considered the question carefully. "There were days when I did," I admitted. "Days when the pain felt too overwhelming to bear. But now? No, I don't regret it." "It's not about deserving," I replied, the wisdom hard-won over years of healing. "It's about choosing. Every day we choose each other, despite knowing exactly how capable we are of causing each other pain. There's something powerful in that kind of clear-eyed love. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The betrayal that once defined my every waking moment had been transformed, not erased or forgotten, but integrated into a larger, more complex narrative of love, loss, and redemption. We are not the couple we once were, Rebecca and I. We are something different now. Scarred but stronger, more honest, more intentional in our love. The weight of silence that once filled our home has been replaced by open communication, by laughter, by the occasional argument that we now have the tools to navigate without retreating into resentment. Is our marriage perfect? Far from it. There are still moments when the old pain resurfaces, when trust feels fragile, when the memory of betrayal casts its shadow. But these moments no longer define us. They are simply part of the tapestry of a relationship that has weathered the worst storm and emerged, improbably, into calmer waters. As we turned to walk back to our hotel, the first stars appearing in the darkening sky, I realized that what we had now was perhaps more valuable than what we had lost. A love tempered by fire, tested by pain, and ultimately strengthened by the conscious choice to heal together rather than apart. The weight of silence had been replaced by the weight of truth, heavier in some ways, but infinitely more bearable for being shared between us.